Who remembers Shadows of the Empire? This came out in 1996. The story itself takes place in between the events of The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, but you have to think back to this time period. That's before the prequel trilogy. None of us had been subjected to the horrors of Jar Jar Binks, and people were still eager for new Star Wars content at the time. They weren't getting another throwaway television series on Disney Plus every 3 months about a character they didn't care about. And people were really eager for new Star Wars stuff at the time. When this was released, it was released as the book that tells the story. But at the same time, there was a video game on N64 and PC that kind of elaborated on the story of one of the characters, Dash Rendar. And then again, at the same time, there was a comic book series that elaborated a little more on the story of Boba Fett. And if you think of that time period between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, the main events going on are that Han is encased in carbonite, Luke and Leia and Lando and Chewie are trying to rescue him, Boba Fett is trying to get him to Jabba's palace, Vader is trying to capture Luke, and so this story takes place during all of those events and elaborates on them. And it was a really good story. I mean, this is my original copy from 1996 that I read in 8th grade. And apparently at some point I tried to rip the book in half just to demonstrate my raw brute strength. So at the same time that all those things were happening, they had a set of trading cards that would go along with the story. And of course it was illustrated by the brothers Hildebrandt. This book tells the story of the creation of that set of trading cards. And it begins with, well, of course, the book itself begins with the iconic New Hope poster that the brothers illustrated in 1977. But the story in this book is of them, at first, going to Skywalker Ranch in California, visiting the studios, getting inspiration, taking photos, getting a copy of the manuscript for this book, playing demo versions of the video game, and basically getting all the inspiration that they'll need to illustrate these cards and do this artwork. And so as this book goes on, every page will have a couple of the final artworks that were in the set, but then it'll continue the narrative of that story of creating the set, and then it'll have quotes from the fiction book that relate to the picture, and then it'll have quotes from the artists about either making that particular picture, making art in general, or making this set of cards in specific, things like that. So it's really cool the way those kind of three threads are woven through this book. And of course, the art style is just the beautiful style that Tim and Greg Hildebrandt were known for, that they had featured through the Lord of the Rings calendars in the 1970s, into Marvel superhero cards in the 1990s, this foray into Star Wars in the mid-90s, and eventually they would take it into Magic the Gathering cards in the early 2000s. So another thing that these books always feature is they'll have the original photos that the artist took of models, either human models or fake models, in their studio, and then how they assemble those together into sketches, and then what the final products end up looking like. And so this is interesting. It's the character Shizor's space vehicle and their reference for what it should look like, because everything had not really been nailed down at the time that they were working on this. Of course, they needed a long lead time to work on this set before all the products were getting released over the course of about 6 months in 1996 and 97. The one big downside to this book is that, as far as I can tell, it was only ever printed once. And so it's a pretty rare book. And if you go out on eBay, you can typically find a copy for sale. Amazon is not so reliable on it, but eBay will have them. But I paid about $80 for the copy of this book, and that's about the going rate. It's pretty expensive because it's pretty rare, because not many were produced. We know all about that, don't we? So is it worth getting if you like the Hildebrandt brothers? Oh yeah, it's really cool. And it's neat to see these bigger printings, because if you were to just go and, buy some of the cards on the secondhand market, they'd be the normal 2.5 by 3.5 sized card. not these big renditions of the pictures. So really cool to have that, have it all together in a book, and have the stories that are told here with it. So I'll have a couple more videos on Tim and Greg Hildebrandt and their artwork coming up. Let me know what you think. Like, comment, share, and subscribe, and join me on Final Trade. Thanks a lot.